Hey, how are you? So this is just an intro to my video chat that I had with Craig Spector talking about the business and all that. So I'm just introing you to the first one, and we're going to call it unscripted because it's pretty unscripted. And just to add to that, the aesthetics will get better as we go. And this interview went, or I don't know so much interview, but this conversation went really long, like an hour and 10 minutes. We will probably keep it down to 40 minutes, but I got to tell you, with Craig Spector, you could be on there for 4 hours and it just never would stop getting interesting. What a fantastic guy he was to sit down and talk to. And as I said at the end of it, we got to do this again because we barely scratched the surface. All right. So thanks for watching, and here we go. So, Craig Spector, you're a writer, you're a producer, you're a musician, you're an artist. You've had your hand in all sorts of things. You wrote books early on, but you really weren't going to be an author. You were going to school to become a musician. You
Yeah,
finished
yeah,
your course at Berkeley 3 years. It was a 4-year course, and you finished it at 3 years, correct?
yes. I did the 3 year program, the 4 year program in 3 years,
Right. So, and then
which ended up being a very wonderfully immersive experience for
so
me.
here you are. You're going to school in the '80s, and
Mhm.
what? You're just going down the road, and you think, you know what? A vampire in the subways would be pretty cool, and you just thought, I'm going to write a book just like that. That's how
It
it
was
came out.
really odd. It was no, it was really odd how it came about. I mean, I've told the story more than once, but I was in my final semester at the Berklee College of Music, and it was like a Saturday, early Saturday afternoon, and I was with my then girlfriend, and we were in the last subway car of the Red Line as it's going up over the Charles River Bridge, crossing over from Boston into Cambridge.
Right.
We were going to Harvard Square to see a feel good double feature of The Deer Hunter and Taxi Driver. And so right away, you're in for like, 5 hours and change of really happy, feel good sort of cinema.
Yeah.
And out of the tunnel as we were going along, and I turned to my then girlfriend, and this was the thing I was known to do from, and I was I I I was watching the train come up out of the tunnel, and I just said, "What if there was a vampire in the subways?" And because we'd been together for a while, she just kind of looked at me and she's like, "Uh-huh." And I immediately started, my imagination was running, and I was also trying to justify having said something so weird. And so I had automatically transposed it from Boston to New York because New York subway system is much bigger and scarier. And so I said, no, wait, think about it. If he's a native born New Yorker, then he's always underground in the subways, so he doesn't need a coffin. He can just crawl off into the tunnels and lay down and throw some dirt on him, and he's good. And I'm like, and it's always nighttime in the subways, so he can kill 24 hours a day, and so people won't immediately think vampire; they'll think subway psycho.
Right.
And if he's really nasty about it, and he doesn't just leave two neat little holes in their neck, but just literally tears people to pieces, they definitely won't think vampire; they'll think subway psycho. And the last bit was because it was 1982. I was like, and if he's a punk, he'll already look like he's dead, and no one will notice the transformation. And she looked at me and she's like, uh huh, you know. And so that's it. And then we go to the movies. We go see Deer Hunter and Taxi Driver, and you know, the whole ride back from on the T heading back to my apartment the story idea just kept churning around in my head. And so I got back to my apartment and I called John Skipp, who was a friend since high school, and we had played in rock bands together. And he at the time was had just moved to New York recently and was trying to break into publishing and had actually successfully sold two short stories to Twilight Zone magazine.
Yeah.
And so I had to, you know, I had this idea and I pitched it to him. Like, I told him what the idea was, and I'm like, and this will be great. We can write it as a short story, and we can sell it to Twilight Zone magazine, and we'll make a couple $100, and it'll be great. And John's first reaction was, "I'm busy." Yeah, because he's got his own projects, he's got his own stuff going on, and everything. And so for the next 6 months, as I was finishing up with Berkeley, every time I'd talk to him on the phone or would go down to New York to visit for a weekend or something, I was always like, "What about the story? What about the story? What about the story?" And finally, I was down visiting one weekend, and I'm like, "What about that story? When are we going to do it?" And he's like, "You know what? I'm officially sick of you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to borrow our friend's apartment, down in the Bowery, and we're just going to go down there. We're going to stay up all night. We're going to write this damn story, and then I never have to hear about it again." And so we did. We went down to a friend's apartment on the Bowery, which actually was the apartment that was later used in our second novel, The Cleanup. That was Billy Rowe's apartment. It was like one of those railroad style apartments, sort of tenement apartments. And we had a couple of packs of 3x5 file cards and some black Sharpies. And we just started playing this endless game, which consisted of two questions. And the first question is, what if ... question mark. And the second question is ... and then what happens question mark. And so we started just, throwing these ideas out. What if this happens? And it's like, cool. And then what happens? And we followed the thread. And we did this all night long. And by the time the sun came up, we had pretty much covered every square inch of this apartment with little file cards. They were stuck on the walls, they were on the floor, they were on every available surface. And we realized two things fairly quickly. One was that we got way too many cool ideas that would ever fit in a short story. Right. But we got plenty of ideas if we were to turn it into a novel. And the other thing was purely practical. There wasn't really a market at that time in the early 80s for vampire short fiction. However, because of Stephen King's Salem's Lot and Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, there was kind of a market for vampire novels.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I went back to Boston and, I'm finishing up my last semester, and a couple of weeks go by, and one day I get home and there's a big envelope in my mailbox, and I open it up and it's from John. And I open it up and pull it out, and it's the first draft of the first chapter of The Light at the End. Done on typewriter, done on his trusty Smith Corona typewriter. And I read it, and I called him up. I'm like, "This is great," And then we started talking more about, what we're going to do with the story and all this stuff. And then I graduated. And in fairly short order, I left my life in Boston. I was, I had never planned on being a writer.
Right.
I had planned on being a professional musician. But I gave up my really cool apartment that I had on Mission Hill Um, and I moved with my then girlfriend. We moved down to New York City, and we moved in with John and his girlfriend. There were about 6 or 7 of us that moved into this little row house. They had been living in the garment district in Manhattan, like 4 or 5 of them living in a one-room studio. And
Right.
so they moved, and we moved with them into this little house in Rego Park, Queens. That was right off the 65th Street subway stop. And so we moved into this little tidy little immigrant neighborhood, and everybody had their little American flags hung, in the little thing by the front door, and we hung a pirate flag, you know, uh, outside our little house, and so John and I were messengers by day, and by night, we were writing the book. But John had also been playing guitar in this very strange progressive rock band that was kind of like it was bizarre. It was a little bit of Peter Gabriel, sort of theatrics, and everything. And he decided he couldn't do both of them at the same time, write the book and continue playing in the band. And so I came in and just sort of he quit the band and I stepped in to his shoes and took over as guitarist for the band. And so by day I was I became a roller skating street messenger.
Yeah.
Um,
I know this
they
story.
had
I want you to tell it because
yeah.
it's great.
At the time they had bike messengers, they had foot messengers, they had I think they had a couple of motorbike messengers, and then they had like van drivers. I didn't want to ride a bike. I didn't have a motorcycle. Uh, you couldn't make enough money as a foot messenger. But I loved to skate.
Right.
And so I was like, well, why not? And so I just, for the next 2 years, I combat skated 8 hours a day in Midtown Manhattan. Well,
Were these like rollerblades? Like
no,
was
these were
it
like
roller skates or rollerblades?
no, these were not rollerblades. These were the
Oh my
old-fashioned,
God.
2-and-2 boot skates.
Really?
I had a trick that I had a toe stopper and I had a rear brake, that I could tilt my foot back, and and my terrain was basically all of Manhattan. I would go from the Midtown offices all the way down as far down as the Staten Island Ferry Terminal, and as far north as kind of like the upper end of Central Park, east or west. You know, um, and I would just crisscross the city, every day combat skating through all kinds of weather. I mean, it was like rain, snow, anything. Heat of summer, freezing cold in the winter. And the interesting thing about it is, uh, I got to learn the city literally from the gutter up.
Right.
Because you're just out there and you're in it, and you're also delivering a lot of documents and things to fairly important people, different companies and everything. And so we would meet a lot of things. Oh, okay. And so we also ended up using, as anybody who's read the Light of the Hand knows, we figured along the way as we were plotting it, like who would our protagonist be? Who would be crazy enough to realize that the subway psycho was actually a vampire in the subways, and would also be able to, do battle with it.
Right.
And the perfect answer was street messengers. They're organized, they're networked. At the time, this was back when cell phones, not everybody had a cell phone. Cell phones, looked like
Yeah, it
bricks,
was a block. It was a
or
brick.
the
Yeah.
brick, or they had the thing that you wore with the strap, and then it's like 5 pounds or 8 pounds, in a bag, and you've got like a little corded handset that comes off.
Right.
Um, so they were connected. They were networked via payphones all over the city, which
Right.
was how we did our business every day as messengers.
Yep.
And they were also the only ones who were crazy enough, just crazy enough to, figure this out and then be able to do something about
And
it.
I'm guessing
And
that in that type of a thing, like, I mean, where you've got a bunch of messengers, these people are coming from all walks of life. So you got some really strange characters in there as well, I imagine.
oh yeah, very much so. And I likened it to, it was kind of uh, like two escalators
Right.
crossing, one going up and one going down. And being a messenger was like being right in the middle where they cross, because you're meeting people who are, young, in their early 20s, who've come to the city to do something, make a dream come true, et cetera, et cetera. And they're going up, and on the other side, you've got people who are just kind of, you know,
For sure.
burned
Yeah.
out, and just gradually heading down and down and down. And so, yeah, you meet a really amazing, colorful cast of characters,
So
in the course of
not
doing
only
that.
was that working in that environment inspiring to the story, but it also helped you with getting the story to the public too, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, well, we had been reading up and studying up on, there were some, and there still are, there are more today than there were then, but there was a book that came out, called How to Get Happily Published. And there were things like The Writer's Guide, which was a thing that came out every year.
It's
There was
all five
like,
of them in my basement. Yeah.
and has all the publishers listed and the agencies and everything, and
Yeah.
their criteria, what they're looking for and what they're not looking for, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And so we had figured that, I came in off the street one day, and John was already in, and he was checking out, and he showed me a photocopy of this article that was in one of the science fiction fantasy magazines. And it was all about how T.E.D. Klein, who was the then editor of Twilight Zone magazine, had sold the paperback rights to his novel, The Ceremonies, to Bantam Books for $100,000. And the article had everything in it: the name of the editor, Lou Aronica, and we already knew where Bantam Books was, because it was in the apocryphal 666 Fifth Avenue building. And and he was also, Ted Klein had written, just a little letter for John, on Twilight Zone header stationery. Like, I commend to your attention the talents of one John Skipp, a young writer of enormous promise, blah blah blah. Ted Klein, Twilight Zone editor. And so we had that, and then we were kind of looking at it, and I remember thinking, it's like, wow, so Lou Veronica likes Ted, and Ted likes you. Maybe Lou Veronica will like us.
Right.
And so we had our next target, because we had submitted it to a number of different publishers and got some very nice rejections
Yeah.
and some not so very nice rejections. And so that became our next target. And so then we, used some of the things that we had learned, and both from life experience and from reading some of these books. And we realized that, one of the first things, an editor working for a major publishing company back in the day, when the mail cart comes down every morning and drops the mail off at their office, the first thing they're going to go through is going to be the light stuff. There may be a couple of manuscripts that they're probably expecting, but they're just going to start up and open up the light stuff, get it out of the way. So we took the entirety of the 550 odd page manuscript and boiled it down to a 1.5 page literary equivalent of a movie trailer.
Right.
And everything was just, bang, 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 boom, you're out. And so it was about 1.5 pages long. And then, so that went in to the package, and the nice cover letter on Twilight Zone stationery went in, and that was our package. And, we addressed it to Lou Aronica at Bantam Books. We found out with a little bit of research what floor he was on, in 666 Fifth Avenue. And if you looked in the writer's guide at that time and looked up Bantam Books, one of the things it would say in their submission guidelines was no unsolicited manuscripts from unrepresented writers.
Yeah, you had to have an agent.
Yeah, period, ever. Just don't even think about it. It's like not, it's just not going to happen. And they were fairly firm about that. So we knew from experience and everything that one of the things the receptionist at a major publishing house, one of her jobs is to turn away young, unknown writers bearing 5 pounds of their heart and soul, coming in the door. And so we knew that. And we also knew from experience that one of the other things that is a job of a receptionist at a major publishing house is to accept anything a messenger brings her. Because messengers aren't cheap.
Right.
So obviously if Lou has, if there's a message for, a packaged message for Lou Aronica, Lou must have asked for it. But suddenly, and this gets into one of these kind of like serendipitous, sort of you make your own moment of luck that happened because, she, I wrote it up on my messenger manifest.
Right.
Like John was home with his, we only had one typewriter between us. And so he stayed home that day and he typed it up, on and put the package together and then met me on like one of the corners of like, 48th Street or something, by a subway entrance, and I took the package and I put it in my messenger bag and then I wrote it up on the manifest, and then I went right over to 666 Fifth Avenue, skated in and went up to the floor and, rolled over to the receptionist. I'm like, Lou Aronica's expecting this. And she looked at me like, I don't know anything about this. And I'm like, I don't know anything about it either. Sign here. Can I use your phone? And she's like, she signs. It's like, no. And so I'm like, I grab my clipboard, turn around and leave. And what I found out later, uh, as this was told to us, was that she thought she had screwed up because if Lou's expecting a package by messenger, she should
Right.
know about it. So she thinks she's made a mistake. So instead of putting it over here where she would put it, she puts it over here, beside her desk. And then, as fate would have it, a couple of minutes later, Lou comes out into the lobby and he's going to lunch. He's waiting for the elevator. And she looks up and she's like, "Oh, Mr. Veronica, you're expecting this? It came by messenger." And Lou actually thought he screwed up because if it came by messenger, he must have been, expecting it. You know, um, so he's like, "I guess I am," and he grabs it, and the elevator doors open. He gets on and he's going down, and the interesting thing is, and sometimes these things happen, and you can't anticipate them. He was supposed to be meeting with an author for lunch.
Right.
And so, therefore, he didn't bring anything to read.
So he sat
But
down and
but at the very last moment, he got a call, and the editor, the author had to cancel, so he didn't have anything to read. So he was like, he actually opened the envelope in the elevator on the way down, and he pulled it up. First thing he sees is Twilight Zone magazine. Oh, Ted Klein. Huh. He reads this. Oh, yeah. Oh, interesting. And then he flips the page and he starts reading our little 1.5 page literary equivalent of a movie trailer. And he's like, "Wow, wow, wow." And he's reading it as he walks out across the lobby, reading it as he walks out the street, turns the corner. It almost worked too well because he started to cross the street and he was still sort of reading it. And he said he almost got pasted by a cab, because he wasn't really paying attention. But then, he went to the restaurant and he sat down and he didn't have anything to read while he was eating. So he spent, the whole lunch just kind of looking at this and thinking about it. And it obviously got his imagination going. And he came back from lunch, went to his office and sat down at his computer and typed up a response and, put it in an envelope and threw it in the outbox. And we got a reply the next day,
wow.
saying, "Could you send sample chapters?" And I mean, you don't need me to tell you this. This stuff like this never happens, like ever. You know,
The only thing I could
but
say that is comparable to what you're saying is that when I got my publishing contract with Wild Blue Press and they published Highwayman, we finally went through all the edits and all that. And I had the follow-up book ready or started.
mm-hmm.
And as soon as they published it, they went, "Okay, so when's the second book going to be ready?" And I'm like, "What?" So,
Yeah,
so yeah, that whole, "Oh my God, we got now this guy wants a sample chapter." It must have been, you know, you guys must have been just ecstatic.
we were ecstatic, but then it's like, oh my God, as I had said, we only had one typewriter between us. So,
Right.
we had to, go through, pick the chapters. And I think we sent like 122 pages or something. And so, I'm doing, manual handwrites, to the material. And John's having to type out, clean double spaced copy on good paper,
And,
you know?
and for what a lot of
And
people don't understand, because when you guys were publishing at that time, you didn't hand in a messy manuscript. It had to be perfect, clean, no whiteout on it, no nothing, right?
yeah, hmm you had to be a professional about it,
Yeah.
and there were rules, you know, and so. you know, so it took a couple of days to get the package ready, but then, we sent the package over, and then we thought, well, what's it going to be? It could be, it could be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months to infinity,
Right.
before we hear a reply. And I think it was something like, it was less than a week later, we got we got the response from Bantam, and they loved the sample chapters and they wanted to see the rest of the book. And it's like, this again, it's the great news, but oh my God, now it's repeat that whole process that we just went through, except now it's not 122 pages. It's the remainder of a 450 odd page long manuscript that has to be, done. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and so it was crazy. It's like, but, but we got it done, and delivered it. And then at that point, you're sort of wondering, like, you know, well, what's it going to be now? 10 days, 2 weeks,
Yeah.
kind of jokingly. And it's like, no, it's more like, now the doldrums of summer and and it's like, we don't hear anything for a month, 2 months, at, and it's, August in New York City is brutal. So it took them a while to get back to us, and it was in the doldrums of summer. And then one day we got a call, and John got a call, and the call was that Lou Aronica's assistant had called and said they finished reading the book and they love it and they would like to meet with us. They want to buy the book and they'd like to meet with
Right.
us to talk about, you know, where we go now. And so, that was amazing. And so we went in, and that was one of those moments, in the prelude to that, where it's just like, as I had said earlier, I had no real thought of ever being a writer.
Right.
Uh, this was just a cool sort of one-off project for me. And it's like, yeah, we'll sell it, make some money, it'll be cool, and then I'll just go on, being a professional musician. Um, but it turned out they wanted to know if we had any other books, because that was back in the old days when, the name of the game in publishing was rack space. What if they wanted you? They didn't want just one book. They wanted a couple of books because they wanted to build your presence on the
Right.
shelf in the bookstores. And so, John and I met in the little park area behind the New York City Public Library one day, and we just sat down and talked about it, and talked about other ideas for other books that we'd want to write, and we got it all. We got 5 books kind of lined up, and then because I had been a graphic artist among other things at the time, I sat down and did this sort of color coded timeline, sort of chart.
Right.
And we come in, to Bantam, and we're sitting there talking, and just chat about how much they love the book and everything. And it comes to a certain point in the conversation, and Lou says, "So, do you guys have any? Do you guys have any other ideas for books?" And John and I kind of looked at him like, "Well, we got this." And I reach into my messenger bag and I pull out this, multi-page color-coded timeline for the next 5 years. I'm like, well, here are the books, and here are the movies, and here's the music. You know,
Yeah.
and and we had it all kind of, and we just started pitching these ideas one after another, and we got about, I don't know, 5 minutes into this, of just us talking, and Lou's like, he's going, and he's like, hey, could you hang on for just a second? And he picks up his phone and he gets his secretary on the line. He's like, could you hold all my calls for the rest of the afternoon? And then he puts the phone down. And he goes, okay, yeah, please continue. And we just throw them all out there. These are the books we want to do. These, da 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 da. And when we were done, his basic reaction was like, yeah, this sounds great. I want them. I want all of them. And he's like, do you have an agent? And at this point, I was, I didn't know enough to know that I shouldn't be asking this question, but my response was, no. Do you recommend one? And, and he said that, he paused for a moment and he's like, I'm really not supposed to do this, but there is an agent that I enjoy working with, and I think it's a husband and wife agent team, and I think they might be great for you. And gives us their number, and so we head out, and we get in the elevator and go down into the lobby, and then in the lobby there's a whole bank of payphones. And we wander over to one of them, and, I call this number, and the agency answers, and it's like, hi, you don't know us, but, my name is Craig Spector. I'm with the writing partnership of John Skipp and Craig Spector. And Lou Ronica at Bantam Books wants to buy our novel, The Light at the End. But he's also interested in these 4 other books that we want to do. So we were wondering, would you possibly be interested in doing this deal and becoming our agents? And for all of that naivete, for an agent, that's a call like, would you like to have some free money?
We just did all the work for you. You want to represent us?
We just sold everything, and so we went over to meet the agents. And by the time we had gone over to meet the agents, they had already, talked with Lou about the whole thing. And they had, already like knocked out the parameters of a 2-part deal, not sell all 5 books at once, but sell the first 2 novels in the first deal and sell the back 3 in the second deal.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, okay, that's great. And so in fairly short order, we had a deal.
And that, for people that be listening, was the light at the end, right?
And the cleanup. Yeah.
And then the cleanup. And you know what is, and I always have to say this, but I'm going to say this because I'm talking to you face to face. The Light at the End was first one for me, but the cleanup sticks with me the most is because I remember when I was reading it, I don't even think I had a driver's license yet. Well, I had a driver's license, but I don't think I had any wheels. And I was carrying it around in my back of my jeans, but just rolled right up and all dog-eared. And I got it off of one of those book trees, in the store there, and they had a couple of your guys' novels up there. And I'm like, but here's the thing is, and that I didn't know this, you guys created a genre. I've read that they said that, and I don't know anything really about subgenres and all this stuff, really. I just read stuff if I like it. Right. I mean, I understand general genres, but you guys created splatterpunk by the sounds of it. From everything that I've read, that's the first novel, The Light at the End.
It was one of them. It was certainly one of the original sort of OG splatterpunk novels, because it, we didn't invent it. We just came at a time that something like this was inevitably going to happen, because there were a number of other, young, extremely talented, writers who were coming onto the scene, and we were, I mean, certainly I was new to going to things like horror conventions. Um, and in fairly short order, we got to meet all these other writers.
Yeah.
And it was great because we meet them, I would meet them, and here it is. It's like, I've read their books
Yeah.
and I love their books. And then I'm meeting them, and I'm having a blast. It's like, this is so much fun,
Yeah.
and so we were uh, we were sitting around at a convention, and and by this point, The Light at the End had come out, and The Light at the End came out and immediately landed on the New York Times bestseller list
Yeah.
for mass market paperback. So our career was sort of taking off, and then Clive Barker's career took off,
That's right. Yeah.
and David Scow, Richard Christian Matheson, and so there was this whole new sort of style and vibe that was coming up through the ranks, the likes of which nobody had really ever seen before, and we were all sitting at a convention having drinks one night in the hotel bar, and we were just talking about it. We realized that at some point somebody's going to slap a name on this,
Yeah.
because that's just inevitable, and at the time cyberpunk was really big, and so we were just kind of riffing on it, and it's like, well, it would be blank slash punk, and so we're just sitting around having drinks, and one or the other of us would throw out some prefix that then ended in punk, and it was just everybody would be like, nah, that's not it, and then we'd just be chatting and having more drinks and everything, and somebody else throw another one out that gets shot down, and then kind of out of nowhere, David Scow said, there was a lull in the conversation, and David Scow said splatterpunk, and everybody just looked at him and is like, that's it, and we all raised our glasses and toasted, and it's like we christened it, it's like
Bring in the
we
new
are
genre.
we are splatterpunk. And so we're at this convention and we're appearing as guests on panels, over the weekend. And so every next panel that we go on throughout the weekend, we announce, splatterpunk, and it took off. It just took off, because it was catchy. It was a hook, we got a lot of press from it, you know, and in the little corner of the literary world, it was quite a little thing happening there for a while.
And you're a kid
And
too, really. You're just like what, 24 years old. That's it, right? When
yeah,
you guys
24
started
years
this.
old, 24 years old, you know, um, and it was a lot of fun. And then one day you know, um, I was in New York. I had moved out of New York at that point, but I was in New York, and I came to have lunch with Lou,
Right.
and we were just out on the street, heading to the restaurant, and I asked him what he thought about the latest article, and he's like, yeah, I'm like, what? I mean, I think it's great, and he's like, honestly, I kind of really wish you guys hadn't done that, you know. And what do I know? I'm like 25 years old at this point, 26 years old. I'm like, what? What's the problem? And he's like, well, now you're gonna be in that box, and that I kind of had other ideas of what I wanted to do with you guys, you know, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but he was exactly correct,
Yeah.
because it's like it was something that was a lot of fun, but then once you it's one thing for somebody to slap a label on you, for a critic or something to slap a label on you. It's quite another thing for you to slap a label on yourself, you know. and then it's a lot of fun, but then try getting it off,
Right.
because people really don't like it when you try to take that label off,
Yeah, if you're a
and
horror
so
author and all of a sudden you decide that you want to go and write historical fiction,
mhm,
that's a tough transition, especially if you've got a fan base, because they may
yeah,
not forgive you in the same way. Yeah,
yeah,
I understand that. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I just think it's cool because now you and John Skip went on to do, was it 5 novels or 6 novels together?
What did we do? We did 6 novels,
The Bridge, The
and then
Cleanup.
the
Yeah.
bridge, the cleanup, the scream, deadlines. No, the light at the end, the cleanup, the scream, deadlines, the bridge, and animals, plus the
Yeah.
novelization for Fright Night.
You also did something with Whitley Strieber. A Was it a graphic novel you did with Whitley
That was a
Strieber?
graphic novel. That was much later. That was in the early 2000s. I did not a graphic novel with Whitley called The Nye Incidents,
Yeah.
uh, which was a really surreal, really surreal story about alien abductions.
Oh, okay. Well,
And
who would guess with Whitley Strieber, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, Whitley's a wonderful guy. He's brilliant. He's charming. He's a wonderful writer. Uh, he just had this rather odd experience,
Yeah.
that even he is the first to say, he has said, gone on record multiple times and said that, I'm not saying that this is what happened to me. I'm saying that this is what my impressions are. This is what
Yeah.
happened to me. Something happened to me and it was like this,
Right.
and yeah,
Well, it's
but
funny,
then,
because I trucked a lot across the US, and most of the trucking I did, a lot of times you get out of a customer and you had to be in Boston by the morning or they'd screw you for the weekend, right? Sort of deal. So you drive through the night and I would be listening to guys like Art Bell and stuff like that. So,
yeah,
it was great entertainment. It really was.
oh yeah,
I read Communion by Whitley Strieber. I don't know if I'm a true believer or not. I'm thinking we got all these special phones out here now. How come we
hmm
don't have some good pictures? But what the hell do I know? You know,
yeah, yeah. It's all very, very, very strange and unusual.
it's
Not to
fun
get too
anyways
Beetlejuice
too.
about it. Yeah.
So now the other thing, like for people that know your writing, and when I knew you because of your writing, uh, but I didn't know that you were a musician. And of course, you've explained that you were going to school to be a musician. Now you've done a
hmm
number of albums, and I've spent the last 2 days, I think, just going through them, and probably the most uh, inspiring one is got to be Resurrection Road. You were recording, you were writing, everything's going along, and then all of a sudden you had a back issue back in
hmm
2016.
hmm
So, uh, so for listeners, could you just explain quickly what happened with that and where that took you in your life?
Yeah, it was 2015, 2016. I had this recurring uh pain in my back. I thought I had a pinched nerve in my back, and I was going to a chiropractor, to several chiropractors, um, because the pain was getting pretty pronounced. Um, and they would do their treatments, and it might feel better for a day or maybe a couple of days, but then as time went on, it's like it wouldn't feel better for very much time at all, and then it would start hurting. Um, and I also started noting that when I was walking, sometimes my knees would start unlocking. When I was walking or even just standing, all of a sudden, I'm fine, and then all of a sudden my knees are sort of unlocking, and my leg, I'm unsteady on my legs. And I was working at the time. I had recently moved back to Virginia Beach, Virginia, after almost 20 years in Los Angeles and 10 years in New York City and assorted other places. And I was working as a medical and legal courier. And it's kind of like I had left when I was about 14 years old, and I came back when I was maybe 51.
Right.
And it had changed quite a bit in the interim. So I figured I'd just get a job that would pay me to reacquaint myself with the neighborhood. You know, and I liked being self-employed. And I liked not having to have as little contact as possible with a boss or something. And so they would just send me out all over the place, and I'd either be picking up court documents, traveling from law firms to courthouses and back and forth, or picking up medical things like lab work and also organ transplants. And I got certified. I got TSA certified that I could actually put cargo on passenger aircraft, and I'd be shipping out or picking up donor hearts that are going out from like LifeNet to somebody who's waiting for it, or conversely, coming in and picking up this big box, packed with styrofoam and frozen gel packs that has like a heart in it, and it's on a timeline that I've got to get this from the airport pickup to the hospital.
Yeah, because
because literally prepped an OR to receive this.
Yeah.
And so that was a really kind of interesting and hectic job, because I was just moving constantly. But then I started like slowing down because I wasn't moving very well. And then the last couple of weeks before this all came to a head, I would actually, gotten one of those canes that you see on the stands at like Rite Aid or something, and so I'm using a cane, to get into some places. And I told the dispatchers, I got a note from my chiropractor that I couldn't carry anything that weighed more than 40 pounds, which was, a thing that they routinely ignored, and would just throw these like huge weights at me. And my last trip to the chiropractor, I'm laying on the table, and I just got fresh X-rays, and he's looking at him. He's like, I think you might need a different kind of imaging. And I'm laying there, staring through the little donut at the floor. And I'm like what? And he's like, like an MRI, and I'm like, where MRIs are us? It's like, I don't know anything about this kind of thing, and when you're self-employed, in these United States of America, and you don't have health insurance, it's like you don't go to the doctor unless you're either bleeding or something's falling off of you. It's like you just don't, and so I was trying to get by on chiropractic and then what was it, Aleve and Doan's pills, to try to just deal with the pain. But the pain was getting really, really bad. Like on a 10 scale, I was hitting an 8 on the official pain scale. And I was also getting disturbingly unsteady on my feet. And it all came to a head on Memorial Day weekend in 2015. And I woke up Monday, Memorial Day, 2015, and I woke up and I stood up and I fell over because my legs had stopped legging. My legs stopped working. you know, I had never had that experience before where you tell your legs to do something and they're trying, but it's just not working. They don't know how to do what you tell them to do. And all I could do was sort of scoot myself back up against the bed. And fortunately, I was within reach of my cell phone, and I just grabbed my cell phone and punched in 911, and I thought, well, whatever's going on here, I think my time of home palliative care is over, because,
Right.
I don't know what this is, but whatever it is, it's bad. Um, hmm? 2016. Oh, is it 2016? Yeah, it's 2016. And so, I went into the emergency room. I spent about 11 hours in the emergency room. They gave me an emergency MRI and a complimentary prostate exam. And, you know, and they came back and they said, and I'm laying there, and they'd also put me on an IV drip with Dilaudid, and I was like, oh my God, I suddenly have a real actual painkiller in my
Right.
system, and so I'm just laying there kind of spacing out, but at least I'm not in any pain, and they come back, and they're like, well, the pinched nerve in your back is actually a tumor on the T7 vertebrae of your spine. Your PSAs are 480, something like 487 or something like that. And I'm like, well, what's normal? And they're like 1 to 5, and, and I'm like, well, then 487 sounds bad, you know, and, the doctor's like, yeah, 487 is more like you're still here,
Really?
and they're, and they said, so we think that you're, we think you have stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer, you know, um, but we have to transport you to after 11 hours. I went in the morning and it's now late in the evening. It's like, we're going to have to medical transport you to Centauer Norfolk General because they have neuro. And I'm like, okay, and then, they ambulance transport me there, and I go into the ER at Norfolk General, and I have to wait a while, and they sort of set up, one of the ER bays as like a, almost like a private room for a little while until a bed opens up in the trauma ward, and then I go up to the 7th floor, and they put me in a bed in the trauma ward, where I spent the next, I don't know, 10 days or something like that. And I had to have emergency spinal surgery because as my wonderful new neurosurgeon explained to me, the tumor had bored its way through the vertebrae entirely and got inside my actual spinal cord,
Right.
the channel that your spinal cord runs through, and started wrapping its gnarly little tentacles around my spinal cord and
Right.
squeezing. And when it squeezed it by a factor of 50%, it essentially short circuited the electrical grid, and everything from the waist down just went poof, we don't know what to do. And so I had to have the emergency surgery to get uh, the tentacles off of my spine, and section the rest of it for radiation. And so the strange thing is, it all happened so fast that I literally, I didn't have time to be scared. You know, I was just kind of really dropped feet first into the fight of my life, for life itself. You know, There wasn't any time to be scared. It's just like, this is the fight and welcome to it.
And that's the
You know,
reality.
and that's just the reality. And this is it. And your particular flavor of cancer is you don't get remission. So this is going to be the rest of your life. You're going to have to fight this for the rest of your life. And it's just kind of like, it was so matter of fact, and it was so like, okay, and it was surreal, but it was just like, okay, well, and I just kind of clicked into you know, um, this weird mode where it's like I didn't have time to be scared. I didn't have time to, think about different scenarios. It's just like, this is the fight. You fight the fight or you don't fight the fight.
Right.
And I'm kind of a stubborn bastard at the end of the day. You know, people, I've had people say like, "Oh, you were so brave and everything," and it's like, well, courage is an interesting thing because courage is fine and well, and I'm a fan of courage, but courage can be fleeting. Courage can fold, at odd moments. But stubborn, on the other hand, stubborn is much more durable.
Okay.
So courage is good, but if you can't find courage, do stubborn, because stubborn will see you through almost anything. You know, and I am a stubborn bastard, and it's like, if this is the fight, then so be it. You know,
Well, and you were told, I mean, 2016, stage 4 prostate cancer. That's not good prospects. That's
yeah,
that's 7 years ago, man. That's 7 years ago that
yeah,
you started this.
metastasized to my bones, and they told me it scored an 8 on the 10 scale for aggressiveness.
Right.
You know, and at that point, the whole thing was just so weird. And I'm waiting for my wife Tess to get down from Canada. I've told her about it, and she's got to scramble and get a flight and take time off from her work and everything and get down here. And I'm like in this bed in the trauma ward, getting sort of dogpiled by doctors. It took me 2 or 3 days to actually put names to faces of
Oh,
all
I
the
guess,
medical
yeah.
people who were coming in every day. And and at one point they said, turned out it was my urologist, Dr. Kelly, who was the one who said that, your cancer scores 8 on a 10 scale for what did I just say? For aggressiveness.
Yeah.
And I look at him, I'm like, that's good to know. I, on the other hand, score an 11 out of 10 on the my cancer can go screw itself scale. It's just kind of like, yeah, I'm no, just what, this is our fight. This is the fight. I
The only
started the whole thing started becoming something in the ambulance ride on the way to the hospital. It started becoming an art project called The Art of Not Dying,
right.
which is where we started off on this because you were talking about the albums that I've done, and I started working on music even while I was in the hospital. Um, like when I was first getting, sort of checked in my room in the trauma ward, and my sister was there, and Tess, my wife, hadn't gotten there yet, and she's like, "Well, do you need anything from the apartment?" And I'm like, "Yeah, bring me this, bring me this, bring me this, and bring me the red guitar, which was the little red acoustic electric guitar that my wife had bought for me as a birthday present when we were still dating,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and, you know, and so I had my little, sort of acoustic electric guitar and I would play it, and I'd be playing it late at night, just very softly playing, and I'd sort of just be writing something, in my head. And at one point, I said to the nurses, it's like, I hope I'm not keeping anybody awake or anything. And they're like, oh no, we can hear it all the way down at the nurses station. That's great. We love it. You know, um, and so I would just, play these little pieces that I was composing. And in so doing, that helped me. That actually helped me. It lowered my blood pressure. It lowered my stress level. It kind of zened me out a little bit, and so I was doing that even as I was in the hospital going through all this. And when I got out and came back, I started setting up and to record. And over the next few years, I put out an album a year for the next 3 years,
Yeah, I was looking at that.
and it was all music. And then I waited a year because 2020 was such a surreal shit show of a year that I didn't want to release anything that year. Um, but uh, in 2021, I released an album that was actually a two disc album
Yeah.
that was half songs and half instrumental. Um, and they're all just an exploration of what it's like living with fighting for your life every day.
Well, and the art of not dying is almost a chant in its opening, like for Resurrection Road, and I re-listened to it like 3 and 4 times, and basically your whole message there, man, is we don't know how long we're going to be here.
Yeah.
I could be here today and gone tomorrow, so drink every sip of wine, which is
Hmm.
life, that you can drink,
Hmm.
and don't give up hope. Because
Yeah.
if everything is fucked, it's still going to be fucked, but there'll be no hope. And I love that. I
Yeah.
think
That's
that's
one of
cool.
my lines. That's one of my lines
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
It's like, some people might say, in a world as crazy and fucked up as this one is, how can you have hope? And
But
it's like,
I
well,
think
because
that
if
it, it's inspiring the fact that you're still creating and that because during that time, like some people, if they get sick, they'll roll up into the fetal position, and all they want to do is just get better or try and stay alive, and they lose all their focus. And I've been down
Mhm,
this road with I've lost family to cancer. I've lost lots of
mhm,
friends. I've been around too, and um, I like your approach is basically the approach everybody should take. My mentor died this year, and you probably heard about it because we kind of frequent each other's Facebook, and he was a writer as
mhm,
well. And he lost his wife to cancer a number of years ago, and he had a heart problem. And this guy got out and he walked with his bulldog and recorded everything all along the way, right? And he had a bad ticker. Now he made it to 79 before his ticker gave out on him. But I asked him one day, I said, why did you keep moving? I said, after your wife's death, why did you keep moving? I said, is because you didn't want to, hunker down? And he said, no. He said, I stopped grieving my wife when she died because she was dying she was in bad shape for a year. And he said, I just decided I'm going to go out and live life, man. And he did right up to the end. And that's what I see what you're doing, Craig. And it's inspiring. We're down to like less than a minute now, so I'm gonna kind of wrap up here. But
okay.
I want to tell you something, man. It's been great talking. I want to do this again with you because we barely scratched the surface, but we're gonna
Oh,
get
sure. I'd
kicked
love
out
to.
by Zoom.
I'd love to. So many
So,
stories left to tell.
all right. So hopefully I've recorded everything. All I got to do is track it down. So,
Okay.
anyways, it was good talking to you tonight, man. Take
Well,
care of
thanks for
yourself.
having me on. Yeah.
You bet.
I hope it turns out well.
The Art of Not Dying. is about more than one man's struggle against a sneak attack from an insidious foe. It's about living, finding and creating the things, situations, and relationships that sustain you, doing the things that make your life meaningful. None of us know how long we have. We all die. But we're not there yet, so live. Appreciate every moment. Be who you really are. Make your dreams a reality. Take care of yourself. Take care of your people. Try to leave everything a little bit better than you found it. Love intensely and fiercely. Exercise radical kindness. Take no shit and give none either. Fight against evil in the world, starting first and foremost within yourself. Create light in the endless darkness. Find the art in every single thing. Elevate everything you do to an art form. Live courageously, unapologetically, and remember that so much of what we do seems thankless because we forget to say thanks. And when the cynical say to you, how can you have hope when the world is so fucked? Tell them, because if I don't, the world will still be fucked, but there will be no hope. So fight like your life depended on it, because it does. Welcome to the Resurrection Road.